But we've now come to the last official question before we go on to passing the mic, where we will be, I'll be put in the hot seat and must answer the question to the best of my ability. But I'll say I'm not too nervous, but I'm hoping that I can answer the question, to the standard that's already been set for this episode. And I think this question is very, very, it's not only very personal, but I think it's very key to our listeners because, as I mentioned, we've heard about the amazing things. We've heard amazing things this episode. I think is the best way to describe it. And essentially, this question is: what's one key lesson that you've learned in life? You've learned in your life. It could be the idea of keep on going, and that's perfectly fine. It could be something completely different.
One key lesson that you've learned in life. Again, the issue with the one. Okay, I think I would say, especially over the years, sort of growing in, some of the things that I do, I think the key lesson that I've learned is when you have a particular passion for something or a want, or when you sort of come to acknowledge, realize, or understand your God-given purpose on earth. And for me, in my case, that is definitely helping people, but especially young people, and instilling hope, and making sure that they know that they can do it as well. So I feel like the lesson that I've learned is once you know that and you are acting on and doing the work necessary in order to meet their needs, all the extra nice things will come when they come. The key thing here is when they do come, don't let that sort of blind you. And by the extra nice things, it could probably be awards, recognition, XYZ. All of that is lovely. It can add to your credibility. But at the end of the day, at the core, what makes you get out of bed in the morning? What makes you sort of, well, in my case, log into Zoom meetings 5 times a day, every day of the week, which can be quite tough, is because of the fact that at the end of the day, it's these young people that are relying on this, that need this in order to move forwards, in order to sort of, as I said, know that they can also do it. So having that in mind at all times, whether you are in your beginning stages of building something, in the middle stages, when you find yourself at the top, that should always be number one. Everything else is nice, but that's your number one.
That's so true. And I think that is definitely a very important lesson to learn in life. Because like you said, it's whether you win awards or, your business booms, you make a huge profit, whatever. At the end of the day, you have to. There will be times when things are tough, and I think one thing that I don't even remember what episode we mentioned it in, but we mentioned it before that one thing when it comes to whether it's starting a business or going pursuing a passion, that it's all about being able to turn back and just whether it's the good times or the bad times and look and be like, am I, like you said, like waking up every morning and you're just like, am I still really enjoying this? And I think I heard it. It might have been on LinkedIn. It might have been LinkedIn, it might have been on Instagram. But I think I heard someone say that as well, I'm not saying, again, like we said, every individual is different. So I'm not saying every individual should take this person's advice. But they were saying that for them, they just look up and they say, okay, they would do that for an industry they worked in. So they said they worked in one particular industry. And one day they were just like, what? I really don't like working in this place anymore. And they were just like, I don't like this industry anymore. I'm really not enjoying it. And they just said, I'm going to leave. And they left. And they were just like, I'm going to learn this new skill and start working in this industry. And they did. And they said, the same thing applied. I'm not saying, you have to always change your job or you have to always change your passion. But it's kind of like what the person was saying is, you don't want to just be somewhere because it's comfortable or because you know it or because you feel like, actually, I don't have an alternative. You should be there because you want to be there because, there'll be times, especially, and I think for young people, especially when it comes to jobs after you graduate, for example, that, that's a key thing to highlight that, there will be days when you might be doing a job and, you might have to stay late it might just be, it might be a really tough day where, you have to deal with a difficult customer. You have to, work, do a bit of work that you really don't like.
Yeah.
And you just have to think back on, this sucks, but this is why I like the job. Like you said, if your passion is helping people, this is why I'm doing it, because I'm going to help someone. Someone's going to benefit from what I'm doing. And I've said, and I think one key thing to say before we end this section is, I think it's so true, because even when it comes to, like you were saying about the awards and stuff, there is that tendency to be like, oh, I don't know, for example, like whether you might be producing content on YouTube or on Instagram, and you're just like, wow, I didn't get a lot of views, or not a lot of people liked my stuff compared to this other person who I follow, and they're doing the similar stuff, and it's not the same. People are liking their stuff, they're not liking mine. And I've always said that the most important thing is always about that one person. I just say just start like with one. Just be like, if one person likes this, if one person comments on this, if one person listens or watches this, then that's it. If one person turns around to you and says, hey, I know you've been doing this thing for a while, and I just want to tell you that I have benefited from, what you've been listening, what you've been creating, what you've been producing. Like, you don't know how much of an impact this has had on my life. Then that's all you need. You don't need, the awards. You don't need necessarily the money. It's that one person turning around and being like, hey, I really love that you do this, because this has helped me in so many ways. And that's one of the things that, that to me, is always something that I appreciate. And it's always something that, when you, like you said, whether it's you get the awards or you don't, or things are successful or things fail, it's always remembering that, hey, look, there's that one person out there that's, depending on you to do this. And, they are happy with you just trying your best and just, giving it your all. They don't expect you to, come out with, loads of money or loads of awards or loads of, success. They just want you to keep doing what you're doing, because they essentially look to you for support or for help. So I think that's always a key thing to remember, and it's always something that I personally try to follow myself, of just remembering that there's always one person out there that's looking for this content that I produce, and they just need to hear it.
100%.
Thank you. But yeah, we've now come on to passing the mic, as I mentioned before, where I will virtually be passing the mic over to Khadija. And yeah, she's prepared a question for me to answer, so I'm going to hand over to her to let me know what the question is.
Sure. So I thought this question would be good to ask you, because a lot of the time when it comes to representation in healthcare, especially amongst doctors, we always speak from the perspective of individuals within healthcare or who plan to be in healthcare. So I wanted to know, from your perspective as somebody who is not in the field, how important is representation to you, especially, for example, when it comes to if you are seeking help from a healthcare professional or from your doctor, and then your doctor is Black. Talk to me about how you feel that is important and how that makes you feel.
So I guess, yeah, representation obviously is very important. And I think kind of when I got this question, I was just like, what's the best way to address it? And I think it's kind of going on the idea of, like what we mentioned before, of, whether it comes to, some, not necessarily fear, but, concerns that as a Black person I might have when it comes to healthcare, or, around certain health topics, whether that's because of my, my background or culture, regarding certain health topics, or whether that's, for example, just healthcare in general, like we mentioned before about, I might not be a woman, but the Black maternal health statistics did kind of shock me and was kind of concerning. But it's, it's stuff like that. And it's always just thinking about that, feeling represented is important, because then I feel like there's a shared experience when it comes to that. There was this, and I'll try and see if I can find it. I think it should still be on YouTube. There was this documentary I watched, because this was for another speaker. They, Vanessa, her episode was all on music and mental health, and she did a documentary as a part of a university on essentially mental health in general, but how students feel about, how they're represented when it comes to mental health. And they were talking about the idea of, in certain communities, especially among Black communities, mental health isn't something that's really discussed. It's not something that's really addressed, and it's something that isn't given as much attention as it should have. And she was saying that, for example, and one of the people on there raised this really interesting point that she was saying, as she went to her university's mental health services, support services, and she was seen by a white person, and she just felt like a lot of the things she was trying to explain, were heavily linked to her cultural experience and her cultural background, but the person just wasn't necessarily getting that experience and wasn't getting, some of the things she was explaining. They didn't really understand, why she didn't do this at the time, or, why she didn't, check out this resource or do this thing, or, why she didn't tell certain people. And I think, having someone from, not even has to be, from the same country as you, but just from your background, there's that shared experience that helps people to understand that, oh, you didn't do this thing, or you did do this thing because of this. And it just allows you to feel that, you don't have to go in circles, necessarily explaining things, because, the person will be like, okay, I've been where you are, I've had this discussion with, family or friends. I've, had a friend whose parents told them this or that. And it's kind of just having that, in that case, that was mental health, but, in health in general, having that experience allows people to understand, oh, this is, I get where you're coming from, or I get the concerns that you might have. Even like, as when it comes to, certain, certain medicine, for example, even not only like culturally, but, from a religious point, that can also be something that, some people might not necessarily feel comfortable using certain medication for certain reasons. And it's also like, again, having that shared experience as well can help you, help people to understand that, oh, I get that you're concerned about this, don't feel like, I'm not saying, you've got to take this medicine or you've got to do this. I understand that you're concerned, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have because of that. Even like, linking it back to the, our mic check, as if having a black female doctor talking to a black female about their maternal health might be something that they might be able to share an experience of, oh, I had a child, or my friend or family had a child, and we were concerned about this and this and this, so you should be aware that if this happens, this is who to contact, or this is a good resource to use because they helped support me through my pregnancy. And yeah, it just allows that shared experience to happen, which might not necessarily happen with someone who's not from the same cultural background as you. So that's why I think representation, especially, not just in healthcare, but, in many fields, is very important.
Definitely. And even just you mentioning sort of having those shared experiences, that's how I know for sure if we are able to have diverse boards in our healthcare system, if you have somebody with those shared experiences at the top influencing the decisions that are being made, we wouldn't see any of these or as much of these health inequalities that exist, because we know that somebody at the top that is representing us in a way and knows exactly what's going on and how it affects people of this particular group. So definitely the case or agenda for representation and diversity is always there.
Thank you very much. And I think it's kind of like what you mentioned, that, you can't have change if there isn't that level of representation at a high level. It's great. You can have as many people, from the same cultural background, and, have a diverse, background of people, at a lower level. But when it comes to higher levels, if that isn't there, then it doesn't mean anything, because, where change can happen, and where change can happen a lot easier than, from a lower level, essentially makes it a lot harder, because, you have to then try and get up the ladder, or you have to try and explain things up the ladder. And then, it's sort of like, trying to, he said that she said this and this and this, and then it just becomes overcomplicated. So like you said, I think that's also important, that having individuals in these positions allows, conversations to happen where, an individual might, and, that's not me saying that, if you don't know these things, you're somehow bad, or you're doing something wrong. No, I'm not expecting you to know everything about every culture in the world, or every, set of people in the world. No, obviously not. But, having these conversations allows people to be like, oh, for example, someone might say, "Oh, I can't, do this because of this cultural reason." In my
Yeah.
culture, we don't do this, and I'll be like, "Oh, wow, I had no idea about that. I didn't know that." And it allows them to be like, "Okay, next time, I won't ask this person to do this, or I'll check with this person first before asking them in a group setting because I know that for a cultural reason they can't do this or they can't do that." And I think that's so important, and it's definitely key to remember. So yeah, thank you very much for that question. So we're now going to go on to everyone's favorite section of MC of the Month, and essentially, as we always say, our MCs of the Month are organisations that we talk about that are relevant to the episode and what we're talking about in the episode. Now, before we go into the actual MC of the Month, I found two organisations, but I wanted to give a shout out to this other one. So they'll be on our MC of the Month or MC Special Mentions tab. And essentially, they are Doctors of the World. So they're essentially a organisation that essentially works at empowering excluded people and allowing them to have access to healthcare. So they've got essentially 350 programs in 80 countries, sorry, and it's run by more than 3,000 volunteers, and they essentially help to provide medical care, strengthen health systems, and address any underlying barriers in healthcare. And they also work at, sharing skills and training communities so that communities can stay strong in the long term. And I think a key thing that they mention on their website is that they also strive to give a voice to those most marginalized, reporting on violence and injustice and unmet health needs wherever they find them. So there'll be a link to them both on the season 5 MC of the Month page, but also on our special mentions. But the MC of the Month that I'd like to spend this section talking about is an organisation called Street Doctors. And Street Doctors are a national charity that put young people at the centre of emergency first aid provision, and they empower them to become a solution to violence. So essentially, what they do is they empower individuals who might be affected by violence or violence in their community with the skills to essentially save lives and increasing their understanding, when it comes to medical or the psychological consequences of violence. So what they do is they have young healthcare volunteers who include nurses, paramedics, and doctors who work in partnership with criminal justice services, schools, pupil referral units, young youth groups and community groups as well as sports groups to ensure that individuals are trained, whether this be on first aid, the different areas within first aid. So very similar to St. John's Ambulance, if you're aware of that. And they essentially do amazing work with helping communities to ensure that they're safe, ensuring individuals know what to do in different situations, and ensure that that their staff essentially take on the needs of the individual communities. So we'll include a link to their website because they've got really informative testimonies from students who've taken part in that. We've got a video from some of their actual staff members who are volunteers who essentially discuss why they volunteer and the programs that they do. And feel free if you are interested. They do have on their website where their programs run, the different programs that they run themselves. They also allow you to book their programs as well. So if you are in charge of a youth group, or you're in charge of an organization that works with youth, and you were thinking of possibly getting them involved, then please do check out their website because you can book them to come to your community. So before we go into the goodbye section, we've in typical fashion, we've added a new segment for our new season, and essentially this is our takeaway message. We're not promising any takeaway food, unfortunately, but think of this as your free delivery service of us, making sure that you guys know the main takeaway message that our guest speakers want you to know. So again, I'm going to ask our guest speaker to just let us know what we've discussed a lot of amazing things today, and I'm very happy so that we had the opportunity to have this conversation. But what would you say is the takeaway message that our listeners should go home with? What's that one key thing? And again with that one thing, I know this might be a bit tough.
No, I'm trying to think if I even have another thing to say. Key takeaway. I think it would definitely have to go back to keep going. The one key thing to take away is keep going, but also this might not be another one. Actually, no, it's another one thing because keep going, I've already mentioned. So yes, keep going, but also we see a lot of sort of individuals, or just the whole essence of working hard, doing XYZ, making sure you accomplish, doing all these amazing things, whatever. But a lot of the time we don't see what happens behind closed doors. We don't see when people are not okay. So my one key takeaway, in addition to the other pieces of advice that I've given, is that it's okay not to be okay. You will have those days where you will not necessarily do the work or go extra hard or go the extra mile. You will wake up and just feel like, yeah, I'm not doing anything. I've had those days. Some people have had those days. You've probably had those days. It is completely normal. And I just want that to be normalized for individuals, especially young people, when you are still in education and when uni gets tough, you've got exams coming, all these extra pressures. It's okay to wake up and not be okay. But I think the main thing as well after that is, yes, take this day to rest, but the next day you've got to make sure you come back and you go for it. Make sure you sort of keep the reason why you're doing whatever you're doing at the forefront of your mind, and make sure that you build on what you're doing day by day. That extra 1% improvement is the difference over a long sort of stretch of time. So any little thing that you do will make a difference, but just know that it's okay to not be okay.
100%. And I think, like you said, it's, that trap of social media makes it seem like, you have to, especially, you have to be, especially, if as a recent graduate or, even as a young person in general, you have to also always be, working. You always have to be, doing something. You always have to be, active and making moves and doing all of this. And it's just like, no, like you said, there are some days when, you'll wake up and you'll be like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I want to accomplish, like everything on my to-do list. And there will be some days where you're just like, you know what? I'm actually good. I just want to spend the whole day just relaxing and enjoying myself. Exactly. And that's perfectly fine too. And I think it's so true that, we as a society just need to accept that. And, I think, I guess we could even do a whole episode on it of, I do think it's partly like a generational thing of before, this whole idea of, you got to be successful, you always have to work hard, you always push yourself. And yes, persevering and working hard is true, but it's also, so key to have the skill of balancing that. So knowing that, if you aren't, if some days you might try something and you'll, instead of spending 4 hours trying to finish a bit of, especially like you said, if you're a uni student, instead of spending 4 hours trying to finish work or, 4 hours trying to research this one thing, if you feel like, actually, you know what, I'm doing all of this work and the knowledge isn't going in, you can just be like, I'm just going to take a break for the rest of the day. I'm going to pause there and I'm just going to relax. So yeah, that's perfectly fine. It's been really good to not only have this discussion as a way to kick off season 5, but to learn more about you, Khadija, and just the amazing work that you do. So I guess like I always say to our guest speakers, I'd be wrong if I didn't say that our listeners are probably thinking, what is the best way for me to get in contact with her? So I want to hand over to you and just say, what is the best way that our audience, whether they want to know more about medicine, more about some of the projects that you do, maybe more about you in general, maybe they want you to even speak at some of their events, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Definitely. So the best way, especially as of a few weeks ago, is through my website, www.khadijaowusu.com, where you will find everything, to be honest. You will find all the work that I'm doing. You will find sort of ways to reach out to Melanin Medics, or if you are an aspiring medic and you need our help, definitely check us out, Melanin Medics, on all platforms. If you want to know more about the Like Her project, you can also find out a bit more about that and actually watch a few videos of our activities on my website as well. And if you want to get in contact with me for any speaking requests, then definitely use the contact form on my website. But for social media wise, it is at Khadija Owusu on Instagram. It's my name on LinkedIn, and also the same on Twitter.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you, our wonderful audience, for coming in for another episode of Pick Up the Mic. If you like this episode, a like, comment, subscribe is always appreciated. If you are not a Patreon member and you'd like to know more about what that is, just make sure you click the link below and you can check out our Patreon page where we give exclusive things to our Patreon members. If you are interested in knowing about when the next episode's coming, keep an eye out on our YouTube page, especially because we'll be premiering our videos for the next season. So you'll be able to see when the videos will be coming out, so you can have a bit of a launch party when it comes. And feel free to comment along to the videos as they come out, because there'll be a nice little comment section if you've never done that before. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode when we pick up the mic. So that's a bye from us here. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Look after yourselves, treat yourselves, and we'll see you all soon. So thanks everyone, and bye from us here.
Bye.